Hello everybody, it beeth the time to do another review, and that review beeth of the new No Rome album, It's All Smiles. This here is his debut album. He is a London-based Filipino musician, frequently collaborating with the 1975, who just happened to be on the same label as him, Dirty Hit, typically dabbling in sort of alternative R&B and dance and electronic, just straight up pop as well. Indie pop. Thought I'd take some time to talk about this new record because it actually kind of grabbed my attention a little bit. The album had me hooked with the opener Space Cowboy with some really expressive vocals, lone grungy guitar leads, a sudden beat change into this really glitchy, hyperactive, kind of supernatural portion with some really awesome manipulations and sporadic edits. Kind of over before it starts, but it's a good tone setter for the record, so I can't fault it there. We do kind of move into a bit of a lull on the second track, How Are You Feeling, with a sort of borderline cacophonous mix, some kind of skittery drum and bass grooves that just get lost in all the noise. It's scant, it's a little bit underwritten, and some kind of lifeless vocals do not help its cause at all. So, luckily, the third track, I Want You, boy do I want you, features a great tune, a lot of very harsh and sort of brittle sound effects, but used really tastefully, much more tastefully than some other tracks on this record. And this noise and this kind of chaos is pinned up against a really cloudy, really hazy and pillowy instrumental backdrop. We get some really lovely additions of saxophone on the back end that just adds such a lovely, feathery sort of colour to the whole thing. Delicious. When she comes around is another highlight on this record for me. The melody at the start kind of reminds me of Karma Police by Radiohead, which kind of had me hooked right away. We are introduced to some grinding, growling synth bass and pounding drums. Processed tones sort of ping-ponging from the left channel to the right channel. It's a really righteous and otherworldly track. It's like levitating to the pearly gates. It's almost kind of transcendental. Remember November / Bitcrush Your Life is another highlight for me personally. First of all, a lot of what's going on in this track kind of sounds like what Sufjan Stevens was doing on his last solo full-length record, The Ascension, with all these sort of like reverse tones and kind of angelic, slightly warped harmonies, more stammering chops and edits in the final leg too, and some kind of trap-influenced beats. Some real mutant vibes on this track, and it's lovely. It's enveloping, it's entrancing, and it kind of does sound like a time past, a kind of nostalgic tone about this track, a distant memory that you're just fond of, and everything about it just fondles you. And actually in this last leg, the hits keep coming. The song A Place Where Nobody Knows is this really contemplative and reflective sort of moment on the record, and the performance sort of gives off that vibe as well. It's a little bit Frank Ocean-esque. Lots of I feel like I've said this a million times, resonant bass, and I mean it as well. It's round, it's really warm, it's buttery, cuts through the mix like a butter knife. Butter knife. Gorgeous swells of violin and keys and horns too, soulful vocals and layering. And I think this song's nocturnal sort of plodding progression is working in its favor. It gives a lot of time for the sounds and the atmosphere to really sort of sink in and intoxicate me and you, if you listen to this album, which I do recommend you do. And the final track, Everything, well, I mean, it's it's a little bit disorientating. Starts off with some really heavenly, summery vocal harmonies on the chorus, which is lovely. As the song moves on and it's a very short 2.5 minute runtime, we get introduced to some danceable beats, some kind of crying tones. This all culminates into an absolutely catastrophic rapture of an outro. Roaring, blaring guitars, crushed cymbals, echoes, distortion, clipping in a sort of purposeful and a skillful way. Almost like controlled chaos. And I like it, if not for the fact that it's just so overly stimulating and just kind of keeps me on my toes. This was a really promising debut from No Rome. And yeah, like I've mentioned, it's a little scant and in pockets, just a little bit unfocused. But I do think that can always be improved. There were some songs on this record that, while I enjoyed how sort of, sporadic and detailed they were, like the song Secret Beach is full of like sort of retro modular synthesizers, super heavy and like LFO and all that, textured and busy, clattering percussion. There's a lot going on, but the vocals were mixed kind of poorly, and the song doesn't really resolve like it probably should have. It just sounds like he kind of put a little gloomy piano passage in the outro and just called it a day. Slap a fucking piano on that and munch on that, you freaking hobos. Some other little interstitial portions that don't really take the record anywhere. I think if he can flesh out his intentions and take a bit more care in the overall album building process, totally think that No Rome could seriously make a splash. That was Dan and Ease for like and subscribe. It'll make me so happy if you did. I'm hungry. It's dinner time. Go to bed, the lot of ya. It's really interesting because his name is actually a take on the collapse of the Roman Empire. Kind of adds like this whole new meaning to everything that he's singing about in this record. Oh, shut up! Final verdict on this new No Rome album: 6.8 out of 10.